welcome back to Cup of Jonah. Hope you guys had a great weekend. So I had a somewhat of a busy weekend myself, working on installing a new vent for the dryer here in the RV, and also taking care of some other measurements and planning for hitching it to the back of my truck so that I can depart hopefully a little over a week from now, on next Wednesday, St. Patty's Day, I think it is next Wednesday. So exciting. But of course, don't forget to check out and subscribe to phoneboothpodcast.substack.com. And also this evening, Mainstream Mondays, Allie and I will be going live, and we'll be talking about various trending topics and various important things that are going on right now, nationally and internationally. Just going to talk through some of the interesting developments over the weekend. But stay tuned, more on that to come, but that'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern this evening. All right, so without further ado, as a refresher, we moved, as we've been talking about, from considering the modus vivendi, the way that God is in his being, the way of his being, to the way of us understanding, the modus intelligendi, to now the modus predicandi, the way of speaking of God. Friday rather, the last chapter, we asked if we can even apply names to God. Can we even predicate, speak upon, give names to attributes or to God in any way? Yes, because of the likeness in creatures, because the effect is contained in the cause. So since he's the cause of all things, there is traces and qualities and characteristics, so to speak, of the effect in the cause. The effect, we say, is contained in the power of the cause. Morning, Shiva. So today, we're going to get more precise and say, okay, well, so today's chapter heading is that the divine perfection and the plurality of divine names are not opposed to divine simplicity. Lower the background music a bit. It seemed a little loud to me as well. Thank you for pointing that out. I might just be speaking lower today. Hold on. Because that's the lowest it can go, surprisingly. Let me see. Okay, let's see if that's better. Is that a little better? It sounds about the same volume. That's the lowest I can get it. Let me turn myself up a bit here. How's that? Is that a little better? My voice to music balance? Let me know. Okay, so essentially the question that's being asked now, speak up in the name of God then, Jonah. I love it. All right. So the question he's asking essentially is, well, if God is perfectly simple and there's no combination, then I can't really call him good and beautiful and being and true and all-knowing and the like all these different names. Can we actually apply all those, or isn't that somehow in the contradicting this divine simplicity that we've already established, that the unmoved mover can't have any parts, has to be whole and simple? So let's find out. Thanks for that feedback there, Shiva. Thank you. That's better now. Good. Thank you. From what has been said, it can likewise be seen that the divine perfection and the plurality of names said of God are not opposed to his simplicity. We have said that all the perfections found in other things are attributed to God in the same way as effects are found in their equivocal causes. These effects are in their cause virtually, as heat is in the sun. For unless the power of the sun belonged to some extent to the genus of heat, the sun acting through this power would not generate anything like itself. The sun, then, is said to be hot through this power, not only because it produces heat, but also because the power through which it does this has some likeness to heat. But through the same power through which it produces heat, the sun produces also many other effects among sublunary bodies, for example, dryness. And thus heat and dryness, which in fire are diverse qualities, belong to the sun through one and the same power. So too the perfections of all things, which belong to the rest of things through diverse forms, must be attributed to God through one and the same power in him. And again, the immediate thing that, again, it's fun to, when we're pondering these things, to think of all the connected ideas. So as we discussed last week, the effect is in the power of its cause, as he just restated here. And he gives the example of the sun, where heat is in the power of the cause of whatever form of light that the sun is. Which would imply, perhaps, that the moon, again, as we spoke of last week, is a different thing, because the effect of the moon's light is coolness, is cooling, not heating. So cool, not heat, is in the power of the light of the moon, which implies that it's a very different species of light. Interesting. This power is nothing other than his essence, referring to God again, obviously. Since we have proved there can be no accident in God. Thus, therefore, God is called wise, not only insofar as he produces wisdom, but also because insofar as we are wise, we imitate to some extent the power by which he makes us wise. On the other hand, God is not called a stone, even though he has made stones, because in the name stone, there is understood a determinate mode of being according to which a stone is distinguished from God. But the stone imitates God as its cause in being and goodness, and other such characteristics, as do the rest of creatures. A similar situation obtains among the knowing and operative powers of man. For by its single power the intellect knows all things that the sensitive part of the soul grasps through a diversity of powers, and many other things as well. So too, the higher an intellect is, the more it can know more things through one likeness, while a lesser intellect manages to know many things only through many likenesses. So too, a ruling power extends to all those things to which diverse powers under it are ordered. In this way, therefore, through his one simple being, God possesses every kind of perfection that all other things come to possess, and in a much more diminished way through diverse principles. Let me read that one again, that last. In this way, therefore, through his one simple being, God possesses every kind of perfection that all other things come to possess, but in a much more diminished way through diverse principles. So that which we all have, all the perfections that we have through diverse principles, he has through one. And this idea of simplicity, of a higher intellect knowing things more simply through fewer ideas, we've experienced this, right? When someone, like they say, you only know something if you can teach it. It belongs to the teacher to simplify things, right? So if I sit there and I try to explain something to you and it sounds more complicated after I'm finished explaining it to you than than before, then I'm not a very good teacher. And this is the big issue that I've had with a lot of the with a lot of the folks, modern day scholars, so to speak, who use all these fancy words and isms and refer to these ideologies in order to sound smart rather than actually to impart knowledge and help transmit understanding, right? And we've experienced the contrary, where a good teacher will just make something click and will make something seem so simple that before it was like, before it sounded complicated perhaps, but then a good teacher just simplifies everything and it becomes kind of obvious. From this we see the necessity of giving to God many names. For since we cannot know him naturally except by arriving at him from his effects, the name by which we signify his perfection must be diverse, just as the perfections belonging to the things are found to be diverse. We are able to understand the divine essence itself as it is, and give to it the name that belongs to it. We would express it only by only one name. This is promised to those who see God through his essence. Quote, "In that day there shall be one Lord, and his name shall be one." That's from, end quote. That's from Zechariah. So that's a neat little reference from Scripture that says, when we do see God face to face, we'll know him by a single name. And that's really beautiful. And actually, I wonder, because we have a name that is given to us by God that we'll know in the end. And I think it's beautiful because by that name we'll also understand ourselves more simply and perfectly, and the journey that we've taken on this life and the why behind everything. We'll understand everything as a more simplified whole, which is beautiful to think with, to ponder and to reflect on. The other thing earlier, a few paragraphs back, he talked about the participation. So we participate in those diverse perfections in God. And this brought to mind, even though those perfections are diverse in us, they all go back to the single divine perfection, which kind of brought to my mind when I was reading it. One of my fondest memories growing up, once the family became Catholic, is my dad would bless us all before we went to bed. May the God of all fatherhood bless you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he would bless us kind of relying on or flowing from what he understood to be his participation in the fatherhood of God. And in the custody battle that I've shared with you guys before, that has been my prayer from the beginning. I would just kind of turned to heaven and said, Lord, you've given me this fatherhood. It's a participation in your fatherhood, the first father, the father of all creation. Defend it. So, and I believe he will. I believe that'll all be restored. But just an encouragement to all the fathers out there who are fighting for your children, to be in your children's lives. God gave you that participation in his fatherhood. It's not for nothing. And even if there's a time that you're separated from those you love, from your beautiful children, just know that God gave you that fatherhood for a purpose, and he will defend it in the time and the manner that is appropriate to his designs, in his providence and in his wisdom. So just encourage you gentlemen out there who are in a similar place, to keep your heart hopeful and lean in on God and trust that He he will defend the fatherhood that he placed, that you participate in through that role and that relationship. So tomorrow, now that we said, okay, we can look at creatures as effects of the one cause and have some understanding, and we can say certain things about give names to God based on the effects that we see that flow from his being, the effects and the perfections that we see in nature. And now we said, well, and actually the fact that there's a plurality of effects that we name God from isn't opposed to his perfection. It's actually just merely an indication of the weakness and the inferiority of our intellects and our inability to understand everything more simply with one idea. In fact, Thomas, in his treatise on the angels, says that actually angels understand in far fewer ideas and far fewer notions and ideas. They understand all of created reality and a lot more about God than we do. They have infused perfect knowledge of all of all of God's creation. So that's beautiful. Again, they're intellects of a higher order that aren't tied to bodies. They're not restricted to sense knowledge as the primary source of gathering information from which we would deduce a lot of the things we're talking about. There's because their intellects are more noble, and even among men, there are certain professors and teachers and the wise, the elders. Oftentimes, they have that wisdom that comes with age, because they've had so many more years of development and of their understanding of things. Things become more simple the older you get, because your mind and your wisdom grows, right? The power of your intellect, whatever the default power of your intellect is, let's say, it has more information the further you go into life. And so you can, if you're living as Aristotle refers to it as the examined life, the unexamined life, he says, is not worth living. But if you're living an examined life and actually reflecting on the natures of things and seeking truth and knowledge, then when you are old, so to speak, you will have a wisdom there. And that's, again, a characteristic of this, that wisdom is simplicity as well. So, side note, practical application, perhaps we could say, is when we're in a situation and things seem very complicated and confusing, it's essential to step back and take a look at the big picture. Take a step back, take a breath, pause, look at the big picture, look at what's truly important. Try to simplify things in order to have a more complete understanding. And wisdom is in simplicity, right? So, all right, wonderful. Well, so tomorrow we're going to talk about whether or not we mean the same thing when we speak different names of God and other things. So this will touch on Boethius, when he said it's more true to say that God doesn't exist than that he exists. That's the truth he was touching on. So we're going to discuss. The title tomorrow is actually that nothing is predicated univocally of God and other things. Predicated univocally, that phrase for tomorrow. Predicated, we know, is to speak a word to, or to name something, right? To apply a name to something. Univocally is the contrary of equivocally. So equivocal is when you say, when you have one word, but it means two different things. So bark and bark, for example, the tree versus the sound of a dog. That's an equivocal meanings of the same word. But when you have the same word that's applied to different things, univocally, it means you mean the same thing. Just like you can call me a man, Shiva a man, Ted a man, we mean the same thing by that term when we apply it to each of these subjects, or when we say a dog is a creature and a man is a creature. We mean the same thing by creature there. So that's when we predicate something univocally, where we mean the same thing univocally, one voice. So we're saying it with the same voice. We're saying man of this and man of that, animal of this, animal of that, right? When we mean something different, then we say it's equivocal. Okay, so more on that tomorrow. I love it. Okay, so thank you for joining me today for a Cup of Jonah. Don't forget to join us for Mainstream Monday this evening at 6 p.m. Eastern. And of course, don't forget to check out phoneboothpodcast.substack.com. Like and share if you like and want to share. And then also check out @Jonah Stormrider on Spotify, where you can find the podcast under Cup of Jonah. That's the easiest way to go back through the episodes. And then also @Jonah Stormrider on YouTube. Everything's under the live tab, though, because we always go live together. So that's where you can find the other ways you can find their stuff. Exactly, Shiva. Just don't ask Tim Waltz, what is a woman? Well, how complicated they make that question is a sign of the inferiority of their intellect and of their understanding of these things. Although I would posit that that's more of a problem of the will, because these things are obvious. So it's a corruption of the will. They're choosing something they know to be false for some other motive. So there are certain things that are so obvious you can't. So even Aristotle says, for such men who, if they're denying first principles or things that are obviously true on their face, then it's not a problem of the intellect, it's a problem of the will. So they don't need an argument, they need a stick. So like a child that doesn't understand certain things, that's where a spanking or a timeout or depriving them of a snack they were looking forward to or something are great ways because they don't have developed the long-term future plannings, or they can't perceive yet the negative consequences of their vicious choice, for example, or their whatever choice they made that was wrong. Since they can't see the long-term negative consequences, you have to show them and start to guide and form their mind and heart to choose the good through presenting an equivalent or presenting a physical evil today, like missing something that they were looking forward to, or having to sit there and doing nothing, or a spanking. These are all ways of pulling a future consequence and giving it to them now in order to help them understand, before they can see the long-term consequences, to understand that that's a bad choice. That's the wrong choice, right? So this is how we form children. And so this is how those who have willfully denied the truth need to be shown the consequences. That's Aristotle's argument. So there is some merit to that. But the point is, we're wasting our breath speaking to someone or trying to convince someone of something that is so obvious. There's no point, because it's a problem of the will. So their wills and their hearts have to be moved, not their intellect. Interesting. Yeah, exactly. A stick. It's great, Shiva. All right, folks. Have a good rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow.